Here we go. And while I'm talking, I mute you to reduce background noises. But if you want to say something, just raise your hand and then, you can unmute yourself if there's time. Please, collect your questions until we have a break or something, and then we can talk, right? Oh, here comes somebody else. Let's see who that is. Oh, yeah, Darshan is joining us. Okay. So, okay. Hello, Darshan. That was very timely. We
Thank
just
you.
start.
Glad I could make it.
Wonderful. So we spare the introduction of the group, but maybe after the break we do it again, or you look in the community page in the group Moa. There, I know you're not accessible to. I have to sort that out with Darshan because Darshan has done all modules already, but not module 1. So this is why he's on the group for module 1. Just quickly, Darshan, where are you from?
I'm from Wellington, and yeah, pretty much been here for the last 20 years. And yeah, it's typical Wellington weather tonight.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so before we go starting, I just make you aware of copyrights. If you are not, everything you see, also on the recordings, every slide, everything that is conveyed to you during this training is under my copyrights. So you cannot make copies of it and use it for your own purpose, or put it on Facebook or anything like that, right? That would be all a violation of copyrights. However, it is sometimes really handy to make some screenshots of charts if you want to, save them if they're very important for you, and or not wait for the recording to be finished. Of course, you can also wait for the recording and then do screenshots and put it in your notebook, right? For your personal training, you can do screenshots as much as you will, but you cannot publish them in any way, shape, or form, right? Okay, very good. Of course, recordings are done by me, so that I'm the only one who does recordings. So please refrain from any kind of screen recording of any kind of the Family Constellation virtual events. Yeah. Okay. So what is next? Yeah. So let's talk about what to expect from the training and from training module 1 in especially. And of course, what not to expect from training module 1. So first of all, I want to make sure that you understand the training is first and foremost for your own personal growth, right? Because you can only give what you have in your possession. So if you are eager to help others, you have to have a full toolbox, and a full overflowing box or bag or room even of knowledge and experience to be able to give something to somebody else, right? So although it is tempting when you start on the training and you get the first information of the Orders of Love, which are really groundbreaking, maybe tempting to try it on, wait, right? Let it sink in. You work with them. That's first and foremost, right? Sharing comes much later. Okay? Cool. Uh, Especially wait until the first 3 modules are finished before you use any of this information, because you don't have the full pictures of the Orders of Love and Family Constellation if you have not concluded all 3 modules, right? So it is also tempting not to work with it, just to chit chat about things with friends. Oh, have you heard this? And Bert telling us this. But this information can come across really down the wrong throat, But Hellinger's Orders of Love are quite challenging for normal social structures. Hmm? And he was very controversial. When he started, he was so much criticized by almost everyone, right? Until it was clear it is just something not that he wants, something that works, right? That's all. We are using the orders of love for our own self-growth and to help others. We are not creating a new society. This is not a sect, or he is not a guru, you know? It is important that you know that. You go about your life, and the orders of love does not need to be applied in your normal life. You can if you feel it's helping you, great, but you don't have to, right? This is important. This is a tool for your training, a tool for your growth, and then a tool to use with others, not necessarily to get you through a daily challenges. No, not necessarily. Okay, it can be, don't get me wrong, can be, but there will be some challenging orders that you might find you can't apply in your life. And I just want to say that is okay. Don't worry about that, right? That's not the purpose. Okay. Um, I also want you to go out of your head as much as you can and learn from your heart, right? Lots of this information are better when you feel them rather than you understand them. If you want to understand them intellectually, you can watch the recordings. Yeah? And that is beautiful that you have the recordings. But while we are together in this room, in this virtual room, creating our own morphogenetic field, there is much more behind the words, right? Than the mind can grasp. And that should go and will go straight to the heart if you allow it to. Mhm. So when you take notes, again, I repeat myself, don't write down what I say literally. Don't write anything from the slides. You can have all this in the recordings and can do it in your own time. You can stop the recording and write it or screenshot it or whatnot. That's not the purpose of the notebook. The notebook is your personal journal. It's your journal for your journey through the family constellation training, right? Okay. Um, Yeah, re-recordings, I have expressed that a lot of times now. This is always there for you. And then we have the list of books, recommended books. This is also part of the documents you can download at the front page of the training community. Uh, and I know it is very challenging to get these books in English. They are so if you are lucky enough to speak either German or Spanish or even Portuguese, you have more chance to find books. English translations, for a reason I do not know, are quite rare. But the most important books are available in English. Hmm? And this is why here is not quantity top, but quality, right? If you have one book, for example, Acknowledging What Is, with it is so old and it is so small and it is still the best book he wrote. It is his first book, and it's actually not his book, it's an interview. If you just read this over and over again, you have a lot more out of it that if you try to browse for 20 of his 50 books, right? Because everything that he says is in this little booklet. This is really, really good. So find that. I think lots of the trainings were successful in finding that in English and Spanish and German, of course, it's easy. That's really a little booklet, basically. That's one thing that you can get. There are others, and you see that on the list of books. You make your own research, and if you find a book, please share it on the training community. Like if you find a book that is kind of not, doesn't cost a fortune, um, and then you know the source of it, that would be lovely for your fellow trainees if you could share that, where you found it and how you got it. There are Kindle editions, which is great. Not Bert Hellinger himself, but other books that are recommended are available as Kindle as well. So these are very easy to. It's all marked in the list of books. Okay, so let's jump into it. Module 1 is titled The Orders of Love. Now, why is that? Because that is the groundbreaking book of Bert Hellinger in German, Die Ordnungen der Liebe. It has been also translated differently. It has been translated as Love Hidden Symmetries. So if you find a book in English that is called Love Hidden Symmetry, it is the Orders of Love. However, it is not a teaching book. It is a book about workshops that he has written. There's a lot in there and it's amazing. It's just not structured, right? So, but if you can get your hands and find the Love Hidden Symmetries, or in Spanish translation, I think it's the Orders of Love. In German, it is definitely Ordnung der Liebe, Orders of Love. Then get it and read it. It's very enlightening. So this is why I follow as closely as I can Bert Hellinger's teaching, because my intent is to train you as close to the original teaching of Bert Hellinger as possible. He has passed away 2 years ago. I know that he had not many students who made a bachelor degree like I did and have studied so long and close with him, and I feel obliged and it's my honor to do that. Obviously, I'm not Bert Hellinger, and obviously I do the Maya style, but I want to follow it closely. So this is why the first module is called The Orders of Love, like his book, and we are also following his 3 most important book titles with the 3 modules, which is Orders of Love would be the first. Then the second is Finding What Mends, which is also a book, which is awesome if you find it. And then the third book is in German, Die Mitte fühlt sich leicht an, or Balancing, right? That's vaguely translated to English. So first, this weekend, it is the Orders of Love. It comes in 3 parts. Part 1 is the first order of love: belonging, destiny, conscience, and guilt. The second part is tomorrow, is who comes first. And the third part comes on Sunday, and this is the third order of love, balancing of giving and taking. So we have a full weekend, and this is why it's going to be quite theoretically. So we jump right into it, and I always try to stick to the time frame. We might be a little bit over because we had a chit chat 15 minutes longer than planned. Yeah. Okay. So first part, part 1, first orders of love: belonging, destiny, conscience, and guilt. Now, when you hear these 4 words, do they make any sense? For how are they related? Even why these words? Maybe all these questions come through your mind. You would see by the end of the day why these are the most important words that we need to look at when we look at the orders of love. These are words that Bert Hellinger has used, and he used it in different ways, as you might think. This is why I said the orders of love are not for, they are not for the faint-hearted, and they are not always suitable to translate that into daily life. Okay. So we are looking at family systems and what a system is. Obviously, that's where we start because we work with family systems. We look at belonging. Who belongs to the family system? That is very important. And up to now, when I have practice workshops with my trainees, this is where problems start. If you don't know who belongs to the family system, you are, doing this in the family constellation because you are working with people who are not part of the system. Nothing can ever happen, right? So watch out for that. That's a trap. So this needs to be your bread and butter. I wake you up in the night and say, who belongs to the family system? And you can say, right? So the next one is conscience. What is a personal, collective, and spiritual conscience? That is very important to understand, and why we will look at it today. We are looking at what is destiny, especially what is common destiny, and do we have free choice, or how does destiny and free choice work together, or are they opposites, or you will see. And then we are talking about guilt, fear, and the death in family systems in general, because we will talk about that a lot during the training, because it's very important. But we need to start somewhere, and this is the intro into this parts of the family constellation. Okay, so let's start. What is a system? Have you ever thought about that? What is a system? I mean, we say family system as if that means anything. But what does it mean, right? What is it? So, first of all, we are all structured, they are fields, right? That is something that science are probably working on at least since 40 years, if not longer, that everything is organized into fields, right? It's not, otherwise everything would be chaotic. It's not chaotic. It's like life has drawers and they are written, something's written on there. So this is a field. So something is, a drawer can be opened up, information can be thrown in, drawer goes through. This stays in the field. So we are all creating fields. Animals creating fields, plants, whatnot, right? Humans as well. So fields are everywhere. Fields is what we are not seeing. Let's call energy, organized energy, right? These organized fields, when they are really well structured, then they form what we call a system. So first of all, we have to know who belongs to this field, and then how are they structured, or if they are structured, and then we know now we have a system. Because if it wouldn't be structured and organized, the field, it would be still chaotic. You can't work with it. No, it would be like a herd of cats. You can lock cats in a room, but they will all do their own thing. Yeah. But if you lock dogs in a room, they will find an order. They may fight for it, but they will find an order. By the end of the day, they would have an order. Cats never. So think of a system as like a room with dogs, like they organize themselves, and just fields as a potential would be a room with cats. So now we have a system that we call a family system. What is part of the family system? Who belongs to a family system? So who belongs to the family system is what we are looking at. That is actually today's teaching content. Yeah. Uh, Family system, we need to know who belongs to family systems because we use in a family constellation only the family system. We're not using anything else. And you might think, oh, that's interesting because I think you can constellate a country and a job, and you can, of course, you can constellate all of this, but there's always one person who wants to constellate that. So there is an issue, there is somebody who has an issue. And whatever you constellate for them, if you would, you don't have to, but if you look behind it, you see this family system of this person. Meaning, if it's a job, then let's say he's employed, the employer would be a family member. It would be just represented because it's an organized system. So you're looking for these when you are subconsciously, obviously, when you are going to a job. You have an employee and somebody in the family system will be kind of represented by this employer. And then you have colleagues, and then you have customers, and so on, so on, so. The good thing is we don't need to know who's behind these people, right? We can work with them in a constellation and not knowing what or who's this member of the family system we are seeing. That is called the new family constellation. In the old family constellation that was originated by Bert Helling in the 1980s, that was different. There, you were putting representatives for each family members up. And then you see how they relate. And then you kind of start to find out who is not important. who's not, and then you exclude them again until you have like the nuclear which you want to work with, right? In the new family constellation that Bert Hellinger has started probably in the early 2000s, this is not necessary anymore. You go right into the issue. You work only with the family members that are part of the issue, and you don't even need to know who they are, if they are in if they're fourth, fifth, sixth generations or whatnot. Hmm? So that's the difference. Already, just by how it sounds, you can imagine that the old or the original family constellation took a lot longer, hmm, time-wise, a lot longer to come to the same conclusion. Like the new family constellation goes right into it. It's much faster, much more efficient. Hmm? And also, you don't need large groups because Bert Helling was working with groups over 100 of people. He had no problem in having a family system represented with 20, 30 people because, but that's not standard. Normally, the workshops are not that big. So you really, also have to focus on these persons that are part of the family system that you want to constellate with. Okay, let's talk about belonging. Family members belong to the family system through epigenetic inheritance. And epigenetic, and I explain what that is. Epigenetics, the word genes will tell it already, means that they are blood related. Hmm? So, when you do a family constellation, when you see a family constellation, when you do your own family constellation, when you're part of a family constellation, the family members that you see are your blood-related family members. You might not know them. You might never heard of them even in the case of an adoption, but you still see only the people who are blood-related. Because these forming a system. Hmm? And that has nothing to do with their social life. Nothing. Right? So in patchwork families, let's make an example. The parents, they part when the child was 2 years old, and the child stays with the mother, and the mother has a new partner, and the child grows up, and this partner is the dad, right? The daddy, that's it, normal. When the child is adult, say 20 years old, goes to a family constellation, and the facilitator say to him, please choose a representative for your mother and your father, in his mind, he's putting up his mother and her partner, which is his dad. But what you see is the dad who left when he was 2, right? And the father who has brought him up may or may not is part of the family system through certain entanglements, but not per se. And he doesn't belong to the family system per se because it's not blood related. Although for the boy, for the adult, that was his dad. There was no doubt. Epigenetic inheritance. Let's see. Do I come to this? Well, let's talk about that now. Have you heard the term epigenetics? Yeah, everyone? So of course, genes, like 20, 30 years ago, it was state of the art to find like the secret to life in the genes, right? Or maybe 40 years ago. And a lot of money have spent in the futile attempt to find causes for disease and this and that in genes. Now, 20 years ago, it was clear that doesn't work because genes can be the same in one person or the other, but they have completely different behavior. This is because genes need to be turned on or off. They are always dormant. If they are not turned on, they do nothing. And they can neither cause a disease nor can they cause the nose to grow. They can't do anything. They need to be turned on. So that is called epigenetics. Epigenetics is the mechanic that turns on a gene. And now, when we are seeing entanglements in family systems, we always know there is a sort of inheritance. We call that an entanglement. One goes through the generation to the other. And about 10 or 15 years ago, hooray, there was a scientific article saying that traumas can cause epigenetic damage that can be inherited to the next generation. And that's exactly what we work with in family constellation since over 35 years. So, hooray! So the science has catched up with us and found out there is a logical reason for that. And that's also good for you to know that everything we do is very scientific. It is not airy-fairy, not esoteric. Nothing has to do with psychics or intuition, nothing. It is very, very scientific. Bert Hellinger was a priest, and then he was a psychotherapist, and then he was, branching out to do his family constellation. He was very, 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 very grounded and very well educated. Nothing airy-fairy there. So I make an example for epigenetic inheritance. Talking about the nose again. So you have a gene, or we all have a gene for the nose to grow, because the nose we have is not the nose we have as a baby, right? We are not born with this nose. Okay. So there's a gene that says nose grow, and this gene is turned on when when this nose start to form in the womb of the mother, and imagine this gene would not turn off. Where would we be now? The nose was still growing. The nose was grow towards your screen by now, right? So obviously, this gene, nose grow, needs to be turned off at a certain stage. And that is called epigenetics. That is what epigenetics do. They decide when is it turned on and when is it turned off. Now, epigenetics work brilliantly as long as you have no trauma. When there is a trauma, and we are talking about an emotional trauma, not like a physical trauma. When there is a trauma, the epigenetics gets damaged. Example. Let's say somebody went in the First World War and had, I don't know, was buried alive for 2 days or something like that. Big, big trauma, yeah? Fear of death, by the way, is always fear of death, the trauma. It's not, that's what it is, right? It is always an either perceived or a real fear of death situation. Okay, so obviously they survive, because otherwise they wouldn't have a trauma, they would just die. So you survive that. What is it? You have a trauma. The trauma is changing the epigenetics. Now this man who grows up, comes out of the First World War with this trauma, being buried alive, has an epigenetic damage, has a son, marries, has a son. This son is carrying this epigenetic damage from this trauma from his father. But he does not know anything about the fear of being buried alive. That's not how it works. It plays off differently. He could have a height phobia or something like that, fear of height. And you would never know why. It is absolutely not logical, right? Not a certain epigenetic damage of one generation is not playing off as a certain damage in the other generation. This is why it's so hard to track. Now this boy grows up, has this inherited epigenetic damage from his father, and has has a motorbike accident, right? And had a near-death experience or whatnot. This trauma, again, another epigenetic damage. That now this boy has two, one inherited and one own, right? Now this boy has a girl. He marries and has a girl, or has two girls, whatnot, a larger family. Now they, or one of them at least, is carrying both of these traumas, and they would probably be an allergy to milk. Because we don't know. That could be anything. It's an epigenetic damage that a gene is turning on and off inappropriately. Yeah, just inappropriately. So, and then this girl has her own, maybe she was molested as a 5-year-old, she has her own damage, And so it goes on. You got the picture, right? So this is how epigenetic inheritance plays off when there is trauma that is not released, that is suppressed. Now the good news is in family constellation we can clear that because we are connecting to the morphogenetic field beyond time and space, getting the information of what was the original wound. We are seeing the father, the grandfather in the First World War, going with him through the trauma, clearing this trauma, and the epigenetic damage is healed. That's the magic. And this is why we love family constellation, because very little, if none, of other healing modalities can go so far back to the source of the problem. So so this is just a little bit, I may have it somewhere else on the charts, but now we have covered it already, epigenetic inheritance. So the next thing what makes you belong to family system is when you are not blood related, you can be bound together by destiny. This is when somebody comes into the family system through action, not through birth. Now, in our original example, when we talked about this boy that dad left when he was 2 and he had another father then, this new father that is raising him could be, but does not have to be, part of the family system through destiny. But not because he has raised the son, just because something else happened as well. And we will come to that. So you have the blood-related family system members, and then you have the non-blood-related family system who have a destiny together with you, or with one of your family systems. So non-blood-related family members are partners, sometimes former partners. Not all, but significant former partners are part of the family system through destiny. Adopting parents can be, but not always need to be, part of the family system through adoption, through action. Always part of the family system is the victim-perpetrator opposition. So either the victim or the perpetrator is in the family system, and then the counterpart, who is from another family system, belongs to the family system through action. Through an act of violence, normally, we have a victim-perpetrator situation. And when we're talking about an act of violence, we are talking about death threats, like a massive impact on the life of somebody else. Not just inconvenience or physical trauma or something like that. The one who is the victim is afraid to die. Right? That's what we're talking about. Then we have this on another scale, which is the advantage and disadvantage giver or receiver, or beneficiaries, and that there are different terms for that. Obviously, that's all translated from German, so I'm just using that what I think it makes the most sense in English. So I make an example. In the victim-perpetrator dynamic, you always have the death threat or actual death has happened, which is most of the time the case. So one is causing the death of another life, and this bound them together by destiny over the physical life, beyond the physical life. Now, an advantage and disadvantage giver could be somebody who has, on the cost of somebody else, built up a fortune, his own life, right? We had that in the Third Reich with the Jewish people when the Nazis took all their belongings, properties, businesses, everything, and gave it to one of theirs for nothing, basically, right? And that kind of now the victim in this case, still alive, right? But has a big disadvantage in life, right? While somebody else has gained an advantage without doing anything for it, without giving anything appropriate, right? So we are talking, when we're talking family systems, about an advantage and disadvantage giver from this severe imbalance, right? Which also has, if you really think it through, also has to do with a death or a life situation. Because, for some, they might starve on the street if they have nothing left. If you take everything from them, that's a possibility. Or the other one who got the advantage may, without the advantage, would have starved to death on the street. You never know. So it is always a severe impact on a life that is causing a trauma. Inconveniences, or even so in society perceived disadvantages, not necessarily are the disadvantages you see in family constellations, which are causing somebody who is not blood related to be part of the family system. Hmm? Lost children belonging to the family. What is a lost child? A child that is not known to the family, either because it was a miscarriage, or it was an abortion that is hidden from the family, or it was a child that was born and taken away and the family didn't know anything about it, or a child that was born and taken away or given away and the family knew about it but they kept it a secret. These are what is all these situations under the term lost children. They are part of the family system through blood, but because nobody knows about them, we never hear about them unless one of the family system is doing a family constellation, because the morphogenetic field will show who's missing. Another beauty of the work with family constellation, there are no secrets. It will all show up. And often the person, we call him the client for now, is very, very surprised, because either he or she was a secret keeper and couldn't keep it anymore because in the family constellation it was revealed, or it was a secret of the family that she or he didn't know about, and now it is revealed. The forgotten or dismissed, that could be a child, but that could be also adults. Some adults, they just vanish. And then, for example, a husband is just vanishing from the life of the wife and the family, and nobody hears ever from him again. And they are so embarrassed about it that they don't talk about it. So generations born after have no idea that this person even existed. But they belong to the family system through blood, and they will show up because the ones who are dismissed or forgotten are the ones that coming through in family constellation, because this is an imbalance that the family system will not tolerate. Who belongs to family system needs to have a place in the family system. And that is the groundbreaking information that we get from Bert Hellinger's work. That the family system, or in this case, you can also call it the family soul, is aiming for completion. Oh, Darshan comes back. Okay. Okay. Hi, Darshan. I hope you heard us. Something happened. Internet. It's the weather. So, and also in former, because we go back 7 generations, probably not a problem in this generation or the generation before, but in 3, 4, 5, 6 generations before, if there was a disabled child or something, well, that was might as well hidden in the basement, practically all its life, right? Nobody knew about this person ever existed, right? Because they were ashamed of it. So these are all members of the family system who need to be seen. because they belong and they need to be acknowledged at their right place. The dead belong to the family system. So just because the physical body is giving up doesn't mean that has practically no impact on our work. So we are working with family members back 7 generations. Obviously, most of them would be dead. And they come through as if they would be alive because on the soul level, there is no death. And we will actually talk about that very excessively in module 4, birth and death. So you can fully grasp it and experience for yourself. You're not going to die, but you're going to experience for yourself what lives on. And that is what we work with, because you need to really experience that to know where you're heading with your work. So now who belongs to the family system? We talked about that before. It is 7 generations. Hang on, it can be more. Yes, it can be more, but we are only working with 7 generations. Because it has been shown that after 7 generations, the family soul is kind of storing, like, this cold cases, cold case files from crime movies. The family soul does something similar. When in 7 generations, an entanglement or an imbalance is not cleared, they put it at acta as a cold case. So it won't show up most of the time. And also, if we would expand our work over 7 generations, we can easily get lost. Because as you will see later, we are already dealing with over 300 members of the family. So in 7 generations. So we really, really don't want to, and we also don't have to go deeper. And I have myself had a family constellation facilitated with a group, not virtually, and it showed that the 7th generation was done with, right? So the repetitive pattern of the generation just stopped there. It just stopped. It was not cleared, it was not resolved, it just stopped. It was very interesting to see. So for your work, go with 7 generations. That doesn't mean that there will not be all of a sudden a constellation where the 14th generation shows. It's all possible. Nothing is impossible. But I'm just saying we are not working with this deliberately. Partners and former partners in 2 generations belong, maybe in 3, but not more. So it's not the partners of your great-great-great-grandparents do not belong to the system. They are too far away from the one who's looking. Because every person, every individual has their own family system. Your family system is different to the family system of your brother. Your family system is different to your mother's family system. Right? Every individual has an individual family system. This is why you can only work with an individual. You cannot work like with a group and say, okay, let's look at a family constellation of this group. There must be always one, because these group members will all have different family members, family systems, even if they are from the same family. Even. Siblings and half-siblings also belong, like partner and former partners, to the but only in 2, maybe in 3 generations, not more. So the brother of your great-great-grandmother, your great-great-great-uncle, maybe, for you does not belong to your family system. For your great-great-grandmother, yes, it belongs to the family system, but not to yours. Victim and perpetrators belong to the family system as discussed before in 7 generations. They are not only in the first 2 or 3. They can show up in the 7th generation. Same with advantage and disadvantage, giver and takers, receivers also go through 7 generations. And to make this all Hang on, there's one more. So I just repeat, belonging to the family system is through blood or genes or epigenetics, if you will, destiny, action, like in adoption or something like that, or through killing somebody or taking somebody's fortune. Yeah, that's basically it, right? So action, destiny, and blood. That's the three possibilities that somebody can be part of somebody's family system. So victim and perpetrator, we're looking at that a little bit closer. It's probably easy. So there are some standard victim-perpetrator situation. A mother aborting a child is a standard victim-perpetrator. However, these are also blood-related, right? Then, but they're, it's also victim and perpetrator. Then, normal murder, somebody murders somebody else, not related to the family system, that would be victim perpetrator. Somebody causing by an accident the death of somebody else, victim perpetrator. It's not about guilt. It's not about, if that was avoidable or not, or deliberate. That's not the point. The point is that the action to cause the death of somebody else is binding. Yeah, is binding. There's also then kind of a destiny community created because this bound that somebody has when he takes a life of somebody else or the victim whose life has been taken is also kind of created by destiny, is created. It's not coincident. That's what I want to say. So on other levels of existence, there is an agreement to even the most horrific things that could happen. We will talk about that in module 4. But in family constellation, you see it. You see it. And that is the most controversial part of Bert Hellinger's teaching that took 20, 30 years for the general public to swallow. That a victim and perpetrator belong to each other. And they actually have a great love for each other. And we are not talking about this, what you see. We are talking about the soul agreement, right? That's it. Not the expression of the personality, and not, of course, not of society and what not. And this never excuses anything. That's not, that's not what we're talking about. It's just that in a family constellation, you see they belong together, they love each other, and if they get over the hatred and the anger or the fear, there's love behind. And if this is not allowed to be expressed, then there's an imbalance. And the family soul makes somebody else suffer. And that could be your child. And as soon as the victim and perpetrator in whatever generation that happened in the family system were allowed to come together, express a love for each other, then this trauma is lifted. And your child is free, basically. Family constellation in a nutshell. Now you can imagine how controversial that is in society. This is why I tell you, don't go out and tell everybody, well, if somebody kills somebody, I say they really love each other. Nobody will understand that. And you are in trouble. Don't say that. This is our tool that we use in facilitating family constellation to help somebody who wants help. Not to educate the general public about what victim perpetrators are supposed to do to each other, right? Okay. So it's not only the act that creates it, it is an emotion that makes the trauma stick. And this emotion is either guilt or shame. Guilt for the perpetrator and shame for the victim. And this is very, very important, because when you are starting to facilitate family constellation, or when you observe family constellation from the viewpoint of a facilitator, you are very easily drawn towards the action you see and not look for the emotion behind. But the action you see doesn't say anything if you don't find the guilt and the shame. Only where this is, you can heal, right? And these emotions have lots of methods to hide, so it is not obvious. And this is part of the training to, reveal them, find where they are, to be able to heal. Love will heal. It is always love will heal. Nothing else heals. If you are on your spiritual path, you hopefully have came across that idea that there's nothing else that can create and there's nothing else that can heal. It's only love. And what is this love? It is unconditional love. And in the family system, what is this love? It's also unconditional in a way, because it wants everyone from the family system, including the perpetrator, right, to extend this love, this stream of love, to each and every one in the family system. And if there was a victim in the family system, then the regarded perpetrator belongs, and this love is extended to the perpetrator. They belong together, and this is what you see in family constellation. If they can come together and express their love, then healing takes place. Same with advantage and disadvantage. This is exactly the same. It's just normally not causing the death of somebody else, right? Just a really, really big disadvantage or advantage, which I talked about before with the Jewish properties and businesses and everything else taken by the Nazis. They are also like victim and perpetrator bound by destiny. And also here is also guilt and shame, yeah, because the advantage taker feels guilt, even if it's not expressed. This is what the soul carries, right? An emotion the soul carries. And the disadvantage giver feels shame, of what he might be very angry. Yeah. And this is what we need to find to heal. We need to find these emotions, these underlying emotions, because they create the entanglement. Again, love will heal also. They belong together, and the family system wants to extend the love of the family system towards the, let's say, advantage taker or disadvantage giver. And also they belong together. So to have all this information for you in a bit more palatable bits, I made an animation. And obviously you can in the recording revisit this as often as you like, to convey you who belongs to a family system. So we start here. That's you. You have your own family system. Your sibling has another. Your child has another family system. Your mother has another family system. Your grandfather has another. Just be aware of that. There will be lots of the same people being part of it, but not all. So you always have to know, where do you start? When you're working with yourself, it's clear. You are the first generation. When you're working for a client, the client is the first generation. When the client comes and wants to work for the child, then still the client is the first generation. No, sorry. Then the child is the first generation and the client is the second, right? Because I will repeat that more often during the training. You can never constellate for anybody else. It's only you. You can constellate for yourself, for nobody. Cannot say, oh, I want to constellate for my partner because he has this problem or anything. There's only one exemption, is your own children when they are small. Not necessarily when they're adults, but when they are small, you can constellate for them. That's part of the orders of love. So you are the first generation, and then the second generation is your father and your mother. Right, that's obvious, but there is more later on. So the third generation, the parents of your parents, which is your grandparents. The fourth generation are your great grandparents. Then we have the fifth generation up to the seventh. We call them the ancestors. We do not need to know normally in the constellation in which generation the ancestors are um, entangled, right? We don't need to know that. Sometimes we know it, but not often, and it is not a necessity. And then after the seventh generation, and this I have calculated, there are roughly 240 persons involved here, and that are only the parents, nobody else, no siblings, no partners, nobody. We have 240 ancestors. That's a lot of people. And each of them, can you imagine, maybe has a trauma. That's not unlikely. Some have two, and therefore epigenetic damage. So how are the odds that you in the first generation carries something? I mean, very high. And not more than just one trauma, right? Very high. Then there's the source. After the seventh generation, we are referring to the source. And sometimes the source, which people say God or the light or you name it, Shiva or whatever you want, yeah, that is the source of life, part of the family system. And in some family constellations, it does show up and it's necessary. Often in the form of God or another depicting of the source. The source is part of the family system. Okay, so now how does that work? Now we have the siblings. The siblings of you, your parents, and your grandparents are part of the family system. Maybe not your grandparents, definitely your parents, sometimes your grandparents. So remember, first, second generation, yes, third, maybe. You'll see it. Then there are the former partners and partners. You, first generation, your parents, yes, maybe your grandparents. Part of the family system, not blood related. Then you have the perpetrator or disadvantage giver. They can be in every generation, even the fifth, the sixth, the seventh. And when they are in the ancestors, we don't need to know which generation they belong to. We don't need to look for this information. It might reveal itself, might not. We don't need to look for it. And then we have the victims or advantage givers. Same. They can be in the first generation, in the fifth, and the seventh. A lot of people there. So now this is you. You are going through the generations in your pursuit of healing with family constellation. And you will meet perpetrators, victims, family members, and hopefully you come back enlightened and go on with your life, happy and free. Hmm? So this is um, a little, I mean, animation, but as I said, uh, watch it again and make some notes if you need to. And learn it because this is paramount, this information. How often have I heard of so-called family constellations where all of a sudden the an entanglement of the stepfather, like the grandfather of a stepfather is all of a sudden an entanglement with the client. That's impossible. Hmm? The grandfather of a stepfather can never belong to the family system. I cannot even think of a weird constellation where it belongs to your family, to the client's family system, right? So, and people do that just because. Why do they do that? Because the client is talking about it. Yeah. But if the client can steer you with their thoughts towards healing the family system, you wouldn't need family constellation. They can't. They have no clue what they are saying, right? That's only obvious because that is in their life something they can grasp. There was a stepfather, and they have heard a story of their grandfather being a really bad guy, and all of a sudden now this client needs to be entangled with him because he's also aggressive or something like that, right? Because the client says there and talks about the stepfather and their great-grandfather. But often, and you will see that in the work, often what the clients talk about is nothing helpful for the constellation at all. And often the mind will also deliberately want to take the facilitator astray. That's a strategy, no? Because the mind doesn't want healing, the soul wants healing. The mind wants to know, doesn't care about your being happy or free at all. Hmm? So let's talk about the lost children um, and what they are. So we have something we call the lost twin. That is actually very common. Um, there is a statistic, and that's all very scientific, by the way. There's a statistic that every 10th pregnancy is a twin pregnancy. But not every 10th pregnancy has two babies born. In fact, I think it is less than 100, 1 in 100, or even less than that. So where are all the twins that are not born? We call them the lost twins. And they decide not to grow and give space to the other one. For reasons that would be in the soul agreement. However, for the surviving baby, this is the first trauma. Because with 6 weeks, both hearts start to beat. And there's this contact that they can feel, and they can hear and feel the rhythm of somebody else's heartbeat. And then all of a sudden this stops. And that is the first trauma, the first loss that one can experience. 1 out of 10 has this. And gratefully, it comes up in family constellation. And you can help the client to come to terms with this. We call that the lost twin. Sometimes in the family constellation, when it looks like there was a lost twin, and I ask the mother, let's say it's for their children, when I ask the mother, does your child has a lump, a kind of lump somewhere, little lump? And she said, oh yeah, there's a lump wherever, at the elbow or somewhere else. And she decided to, and then I asked, yeah, well, if you decide that you take it out, you will find tissues in there, like hair, nail, some tiny wee bit, but definitely somebody else's DNA, if you want to make a test. And that is the remains of the lost twin in the womb. So the tissue that has already formed in the embryo will either go in the placenta. So you see often in the placenta these tissues. If the midwife knows about it and looks carefully, they will see it. Or it is disintegrated these tissues into the other baby. Hmm? So either or. So that's where it is. It's tiny, tiny, tiny material, but you see it. And I had several cases like this, where actually then the client said, "Oh my gosh, I had that operated, and I've been told there was some tissues in there." But nobody wonders, where's this coming from. So the hidden special needs child is also lost children, especially in former generations, not necessarily in ours. Obviously, we are much more relaxed about that, but 3, 4 generations before, nobody was relaxed about that, right? The child who was given away, I think I mentioned that before. The aborted child is a lost child, also often not talked about. Abortion is for the soul a hard thing to swallow, even though morally there's nothing wrong with it, yeah? But for the soul, it's hard to swallow. And for the family system, it is impossible to deal with it if it's not acknowledged. Hmm? Needs to be acknowledged. Miscarried child as well. So lots of mothers experiencing miscarriages, which is kind of a natural part of giving birth. But still, this child who has already formed in the womb is part of the family system, and often it's not, acknowledged as such, and that causes an imbalance in the next generation, often in the siblings who survive, and often paired with guilt or shame. The stillborn, of course, is also a lost child. The child who died later in early years and is then not talked about because nobody wants to bother the siblings with it, for example, right? Belongs to the family system. Then we look at bound together by destiny. Um, so you can either be temporarily or through a lifetime or even lifetimes bound together by destiny with somebody else. Some call it soul agreements, um, or other terms for this. And Bertellinger called it destiny, or bound by destiny, in German, of course, not in English. Um, so this could be accidents, like if somebody has an accident, accidentally takes the life of somebody else. Of course, it's an accident, but on a soul level, this has been agreed upon somehow, right? When you are familiar with the concept of karma, we are talking about that in module 4, calling action, then you know that it could also be balancing out an action from another lifetime. So you would wonder, oh, why would somebody agree to be like killed in an accident with 20 years? That doesn't make sense. But it would make sense if you would think at other lifetimes where maybe this soul has caused somebody else's death and has now agreed to experience this from the other side. So often we have to expand our viewpoint to understand things. And as vaster your viewpoint is, as more it encompasses, as more you can understand, right? That's as simple as that. So even if you find some of what I say, some of the teaching content challenging for for your belief system or how you grew up or your profession or whatever, that's fine. Don't worry about that. It is not about that. It's not forming a new belief system or anything. It's just about expanding your viewpoint. Just you don't need to agree to it, but please don't disagree to it neither. There's no reason to disagree or agree. You can just listen and see if you see it in a family constellation, what kind of effect it has on the process of healing. We have tragedies. Every kind of tragedy is normally also a destiny of the person involved. Romeo and Juliet, for example. or something similar. A disease could be also bound by destiny, especially thinking of COVID. I mean, COVID is not as bad as everybody says, or as we made believe. I mean, there's lots of other diseases who are causing lots more deaths. However, if you would have, like, if you would carry a disease that would cause the death of somebody else, well, guess what? Bound by destiny. That's how it is. You can also be bound by destiny through caring for somebody else. That would be the event of an adoption mother, who cares for a child, it's not her own. And through this act of caring, or this act of caring um, can be designed on another level of existence as a destiny. They bound to meet and bound to become a family in this way. What else do we have? Yeah, and the destinies, the bound by destiny can end through fulfillment of the duty. That's normally the case. So bound by destiny is also partnerships. Yeah, partnerships are also destiny relationships. And well, when a partnership ends, odds are that whatever destiny that was, whatever they had to agreed upon to work on, is just come to an end. And because it's a soul level, they don't know it, and they find other reasons why something has to come to an end. In fact, it's probably out of the hand of the partners altogether, right? But then, of course, the mind needs to have a reason why something ends, and then that's it, and then that's the apparent reason, while in fact it's actually a destiny relationship that came to an end because the destiny was fulfilled, whatever it was. Death is normally also causing the end of a destiny relationship. Um, However, if it is a traumatic experience, right? I'm not talking about the death cause. That's not the death causing somebody else's death. That's just somebody dies, like naturally, right? So that is coming then normally to an end of the bound together by destiny relationship. And then the signs are, for example, coming back to the partnership, a partner is leaving the other partner, although love is still felt, right? But somehow this partner cannot stay. And that is a clear sign, and you see this also in family constellation, of a destiny a relationship comes to an end. And that needs to be acknowledged, right? To be able to move on for both. Or, on the other hand, somebody is not leaving the partner, although no love is felt. Well, we all know relationships like that, right? And you always ask yourself, why are they still together? Well, there will be a reason, and it's most likely a soul agreement why they are still together. So then, the forgotten or the dismissed. These are family members no one talks about. Well, you were thinking, well, if nobody talks about it, how do we know that they even exist? You don't know until you do a family constellation. And then one of the family members you know of will see somebody's missing. They will just say that. I feel somebody's missing on my right or left side, or I see somebody over there standing. That's why we have the representatives. They can see that. And then if you have another representative, then the family soul is happy. Everybody's happy. So you know, okay, there was a family member nobody talked about, but he belongs to the family system, so it needs to be there, acknowledged. Some left the family conscience because they developed their own way of life and they couldn't stay with the family, right? Especially when a family is very religious and there is maybe a family member, a kid who cannot comply with these restrictions, right? So then this child or this young adult is leaving the family and maybe nobody talks about him or her anymore. Some are dismissed because of what kind of sexual preferences or gender preference or whatnot. Again, not so much in our times, but definitely in former generations. Vanish, someone just vanishes, a war situation like this. Um, so in Germany, with these two world wars, it was sometimes heard about that a soldier is not marked as dead, but never returns home. And for some, it was just, they just didn't want to go home and thought that's great. I form a new life somewhere else in the world. So the vanished are obviously still part of the family system and needs to be acknowledged on a soul level, even if they don't appear anymore in person. Excommunicated or disowned members, especially in a religious context, is also somebody who's forgotten or dismissed. Um, and then we look at the dead. I think before we go on the break, let's see how far we can go. Um, so how do we deal with dead people in family constellations? First of all, that doesn't matter. The physical death just doesn't matter. They are still there. The soul is there. So don't worry about somebody's dead or not. Of course, when we go later in facilitating family constellation, there's lots of specific things about that people being represented, but that's not for our purpose now in module one of interest. Um, then the question is always who or what is dying. It's the body's dying, the soul is not dying. We call that the soul journey, and that's what we work with. In family constellation, we are working with the soul energy of the family. We are working with the family soul and the members, which are also the souls, right? Um, yeah, we are actually doing an exercise. Let's see if we have time for that. Um, this is the death exercise. We probably do that in module 4 because there we have much more time for exercises. So we might skip that. Um, talk about adoptions. I have briefly touched it. Adoptions are tricky. They are socially seen differently to what Bert Hellinger, how Bert Hellinger puts them in the orders of love. So when you have an adoption in a family constellation, follow the orders of love, not what the people think about, especially not the client, right? That's important. You always see the blood-related family when you have a child that is adopted in a family constellation, and not the adopted parents. The adopted parents can be part of it just through either destiny to through disadvantage or advantage giving, or through victim perpetrator even, right? So that's all possible, but not just the act of adoption itself is not creating a belonging. Um, Bert Hellinger was very strict, as also socially not very well, went down very well the throat of society, saying that most adoptions are wrong for the soul. Because as long as the child has physical parents, the child is always better with the parents, regardless what society thinks about it. If these are good parents or bad parents or whatnot, right? He says the family soul wants the children together with the parents. That's why they are born there, even in the hardest of circumstances, right? And we are kind of playing destiny with saying that's not the right place for the child and take them out there and take them somewhere else. Hmm? It's kind of playing God or something like that. Um, and also in adoptions that are obviously the right thing to do, like from third world countries, taking a child who has maybe parents who are starving or living on the street or something, still in the orders of love, better the child dies with them than being adopted, right? So this is another why you don't go out and talk with your bestie tonight about how awesome it is, how horrible it is to adopt a child, because you will not get love for that. I tell you that right away. But you can work with it in a family constellation. It is very to the point. It will bring on the healing. So what is Bert Hellinger saying? He says, as long as there's a parent, adoptions are wrong. They are not in the orders of love. However, if the circumstances of the parents are not suitable to raise a child, the child can go in foster care. Foster care is not the same as adoption because the foster parents are not pretending to be the parents. They are not legally taking over the role of a parent. And that's the difference. Hmm? And you see that in family constellation. When there was a foster family, there is no problem. When there was an adoption family, there is a problem. However, if the child has no parents, like they died, both of them, and there is not a close relative neither who can look properly after the child, then this is a case to adopt because the child simply doesn't have parents. So nobody takes a role away from somebody else. That would be the only case that Bert Hellinger says where you can see in a family constellation that the adoption is in order and there's no issue with. Adoptions are often selfish motivated, by the way. It is very rare. If you're really compassionate, you are caregiving. You're not adopting, right? Because adoption means I take it away. It's my child. It's not their child. It's my child. No, the war begins. But if you are just caring after the child and never pretending it's my child, it's always the child of somebody else, that is much more compassionate than adopting, right? So adopting is often selfish motivated. I know a personal. I have an example. Somebody I know has adopted a child from. She lives in America, in Canada, and she has adopted. She had a late child. She had another partner. She had 3 children. They were teenagers meanwhile. A new partner, and now got pregnant with a new partner. Has a child, and she knew it's gonna. She's gonna grow up with the only child because all the 3 siblings are so like 10, 15 years older. So she wanted to adopt another child so this child is not alone. And she adopted a child from Haiti after the catastrophe there in Haiti. And this child had parents. And it was very, very difficult. I have observed that it was very, very difficult for the family and for the child. And you could clearly see something was not okay. But anyhow, so that's that. So bear that in mind when you work with adoptive families. Always ask, okay, were your parents dead or not, or what were the parents of the child dead or not? That's an important information. Okay. So okay, so we do a break here. Normally our breaks are 10 minutes, so please come back in 10 minutes and turn your screen, your video off and mute. So, you know, you can go and do your thing for 10 minutes. Yeah? And I see you then. Bye. Before we continue with our slides, did you hear anything that raises a question or you want to talk about or you want to share something about what we have talked in the first half of today? Yes, Mana?
Thank you, Maya. It was a very, very enlightening session. I had one question pertaining to the epigenetic damage that you spoke about. You said that the damage can show up in any way. So it doesn't have to have a connection with the root that caused it, right? So a trauma could show up as a lactose intolerance. It could be a fear, a phobia. It could just, it could show up naturally. And how does that happen? Like it depends on the soul's personal epigenetics, or is there any study or any understanding how the trauma shows up?
Not as I'm aware of. To me, it looks random, not related. Maybe there's a system behind. I'm not aware of that anybody has ever try to look into it, maybe in the future, maybe you're going to be the one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, Claudia?
I don't, thank you for giving me the platform. I don't really have a question, but when we were speaking about victim perpetrator relationship and how that actually works, that it actually ends up in love, very good books to read for somebody who has got huge problem around, get the head around that, is Neil Donald Welsh. If you ever heard of him, it's called Conversation What, where it actually gets portrayed in a way that the mind can somehow follow of how that all works. Just as a, you know, hopefully somebody gets something out of it, or whether somebody has got really a problem to get the head around it. But I found it very helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Claudia. I have read them. Yeah, I like the Conversations with God. Yes, that's a good point. Thank you. Right. Okay, I'm gonna share. Yeah, Alessandra, you go. Well,
Yeah, I just have a question. I didn't understand why or how that it happened that every individual in the family has a different family system.
Aha. So if you look at the animation, there is you, and then from your perspective, your parents, your grandparents, your former partners, your siblings, your partners, yeah, and victim perpetrator. If you have a sibling, already the sibling has different partners, right?
Mm.
Maybe a different perpetrator or victim. So already there is a different family system. Most of the people will be the same, but not all. Hmm?
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at, especially if you look at the generation of your grandparents, for example, right? They have two more generations, right? Because the grandparents is the first generation. Then compared to you, your grandfather has two more generations in the family system that you don't have.
Yes, yes,
So
that's
that's
what.
already another, and obviously other victim perpetrator situations, advantages to chance to give up partners, siblings, because for the grandparents, the siblings of the parents of the grandparents and your great grandparents belonging to their system but not to yours.
Yes, I understand. Thank you very much. And I have one more question about does how it gets into the family constellation understanding things like suicide. How it works in, because we've been victim perpetrators, advantage, disadvantage, but I couldn't put
Well, that's not a matter of who belongs to the family system. There's a person and they may commit suicide, they still have the same family system, the same family system. That's not a difference. Where you probably want to point at is something that you will see in module 2, that are the dynamics that somebody is causing to take their own life.
okay.
That's the dynamic. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is what I was trying to understand. Yes.
Mm-hmm. That's in module 2.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
Rocío. Hello.
Hello. I actually have two questions that are interrelated. So one, what is the definition of a partner? Like, do you have to be married to actually call them partner? And which leads to the next question is, you mentioned that you are part of their family as well. So what happens if you haven't closed, for example, a previous relationship properly? Are you still part of their family system or not?
Yes, you are. So a partner is then part of the family system if he or she shows up in a family constellation because they play a vital role. So you can't kind of nail that down. It has not to do with marriage at all. It can be life partner. That doesn't matter. We are now facing interesting situations. When I'm working with clients from Asian culture, I'm not quite sure how it's in India, Mana, but they have multiple wife situation there. So when I work with people from Arabic countries, they, somebody is somebody's second wife. Bert Hellinger, as far as I know, had no such constellations that I'm aware of. So there you see, you have to find out. So Bert Hellinger's work is epistemologisch. Probably in English you would say phenomenologically, something like that, meaning that is the science to find rules through observation of the result, not through a theory. So you observe something, in some circumstances it's always the same result, and then you see it again and again and again, and then it becomes a scientific fact, although you have no proof why it is. That is called epistemologisch or oh gosh, this is such a tongue breaker. Maybe empirical is the English word.
I
Doesn't-
understand what you're trying to say.
Good. Okay, so that is the science behind Bert Hellinger's work, is that he has observed it 100 times, and then this is so. So now the 101st time you can say, okay, it is so. I don't need to observe it anymore. I just know it is so, right? And so this is the case with partners. So you observe that a specific partner is part of the family system through, I think, the heartfelt connection. You really, if you want so, it's the impact of the partnership on the relationship. So some maybe has 20 partners and none has an impact, and nobody shows up in a family constellation. And somebody had only 2 partners in their whole life and both show up in the family constellation, right? So that's why these questions cannot be answered theoretically. You have to observe them in the constellation. And that's also the work that we do in family constellation. We are never assuming anything. Although you have a lot of theory through the 5 teaching modules, I call that, I like the analogy for a plumber. I think we are plumbers. There is a water leak in somebody's house, and we are called to help to fix it, right? And what do you do as a plumber? First of all, you have to know how plumbing works. Otherwise, you cannot help. And secondly, you have to have a toolbox where all the tools are in that you need to get this leak fixed, right? So that's exactly the same what we do. We have the knowledge and the toolbox, and then we go there and then we fix it, kind of, right? So we help the client to fix it. So this is exactly what you learn here. You learn a theory, yes, but when you go in the house, when there is a leak, you don't know where the leak is. You have no idea. You have to look for it. Somebody's calling, oh, my kitchen is underwater. Where you don't know where the leak is. You have to go and look. And we do the same. We have to go and look at the constellation. And then we see where the imbalance is of the order. And then we know, because we learned it, it's our tool. We open our toolbox, we grab not the spanner, we grab like a dynamic and then a word. And then we know we can apply this word and this dynamic, and that will actually heal, aka fix the leaking pipe.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. All right. So family constellation. So in a family constellation, I emphasize that a lot because it's really important, and there's a lot of mistakes done over the course of the time since people are facilitating family constellation. You work only with the people who belong to the system, never ever with somebody else, because they cannot have a possible impact on the healing. It's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. So forget it. It might be interesting. It is kind of a role play thing, and there's a lot of family constellations, so-called family constellations, which are actually role plays. And people love that, and they feel so good about it, because they love this role plays, and they go home and they feel good about the event, but healed is nothing, right? So that's the difference. So we only work with the people who belong to the family system, regardless what the client knows about them or if they even want them in there. It's not our concern, right? Because we are called not by the client, we are called by the family system to help. Right? The family system is our client, not the person who is sitting there. So we always have the family system in our view, not only the client. Energy is like a stream flowing in one direction. You know this, and it's the same in family constellation. In the orders of love, we see that where the energy flow it always goes in one direction, and we follow it, right? It's like we follow the dribbling water from the towards the source of the dribble, which is where the plumbing needs to be done to fix it, right? So somewhere we see the dribble and then we follow it, and then we find actually the originating. When you think of a stream of water, and that's a lovely depicturing, when you think what is a family constellation. So you have the stream of water, which is a family system, would be the stream. And then it goes from the top down. And now there is a rock in the water. That is an entanglement or an issue. The water cannot flow. And in our case, it's the love. It's the love of the family system that needs to flow from one generation to the other, right? So when this cannot flow, there is a rock. What are we doing? We are taking the rock and putting it aside. Actually, we are not doing that. The client is doing that. We are helping the client to do that. And that's it. Very, very simple. And then the flow of love can flow again. Maybe there's another rock. Of course, there will be another rock. There will be maybe several rocks, hundreds of rocks, maybe just one. Or maybe it's just the biggest rock is in the way and the others are just small and don't hindering too much the flow of love. That's actually why we do and what we do in family constellation. So you think about this love as a life force for the morphogenetic field. So for the family system, which is forming this, system is a field, an organized field. So, and in our case, it's a morphogenetic field. So the family system is part of this morphogenetic field, which has all the information. Only that the information are not structured because it's a field. But in the family system, the information are structured, right? Because it's an organized field. Now we are accessing through the family system this morphogenetic field, getting the information needed and putting them in the right place in the orders of love. So we are giving this order. And therefore, let the love flow again, like a stream of water. Now, why is this information that we get from the morphogenetic field only traumas? That is a good question. Why is this not why are there not good memories? Why are there only the traumatic experiences that we are accessing? This is because the good experiences are love itself. There's a love is not disturbed. And love is the life force, is nourishing the family soul. It doesn't need to be stored as energy. It's like eating good food. It's making the essence of the family soul, it's making the family soul bigger and expand and more loving and all of this. So this information is already stored in form of love. You don't get it. But everything that is a rock in the stream of love, that's an information in the morphogenetic field that it will store for 7 generations, sometimes longer, until somebody is able to see the rock and by seeing, removing it. And then the love can flow again. So the morphogenetic field is storing only traumatic experience. When you have a client and he's talking to you about what makes them happy, that's all good. That's role play. We don't need to work with that. That's not why the family system sends the client. That is just camouflaging the trauma that the client doesn't want to touch. So when there's somebody sitting next to you and they have no problems in a family constellation, there are two ways to deal with it. Either you send this person back to the seat because there's nothing to work with, right? Or behind this happiness lies a deep sadness that you need to reveal. The second option is more likely, by the way. Okay. I talked about the new versus the old family constellation, so we said that, and I also extended on the next family constellation, which you are part of. And now we are just briefly touching constellating organizations. I briefly touched it actually at the beginning of today. And it's actually really, really good to do. And in Germany, it's actually a thing to constellate workplaces. I had politicians who came as clients who wanted to look at whatever a regulation they were working on. In any circumstances, really, when you have a genuine interest, like what we call an issue, a genuine interest to solve it, and it has to do with your life, you can have a constellation, right? And you work with the employees, you work with the founder, you work with them. I just say this is because they, as we said before, you can only do a family constellation with family members. They will all be representing family members, but we do not need to know which one to help the client. We see the dynamics, we solve them, we give them help to decide things in their office, in their politics and whatever, and that's all that is needed. But we know, being trained in family constellation, that even if the client is talking about an object like money, as soon as it is part of the family system, it is actually a family member, one of the ones who belongs, right? It's always one of the ones who belongs, because otherwise it wouldn't show up. So now we talk about conscience and destiny. This is a little bit complicated, I'm afraid, and you don't need to understand it at first sight. You can revisit the video recordings and you can read the books. But Henning was very has extended very much on the conscience. It has a great impact on his work, and I want to convey it to you. However, in the day-to-day work of family constellation, you probably won't find, it has such a big impact. But anyhow, so we're going to talk about it. There are three consciences in the orders of love: the personal, the collective, and the conscience of what he calls the spirit mind. We will also look at destiny and the common destiny in this context. So let's look what is the personal conscience. Every action is guided by conscience, Bert Hellinger says. And why is this? Because this personal conscience is nothing else than conditioning. The conditioning that we all are exposed when we're in alpha state, which is already in the womb of the mother until latest 7 years. Definitely up to 4 years, right? We are basically in alpha state, meaning consuming values around it and without doubting or questioning them, making it our own. That is what we call conditioning. So the subconscious mind is conditioned that this is right or wrong, what you've been told or what you've been lived for by your parents, or other groups that are raising this child until you're 4 up to max 7 years, more 4 or 5 years. And your actions, regardless how old you are guided still by this conditioning. And that's a fact. That is how life works, because the young child who's born cannot survive on its own, so it has to learn the rules of the immediate family to survive. It wants to belong, right? And and that's how life is designed to do that. However, it is also creating very tight boundaries to our life. And when we feel unhappy or restrained in our own lives, then we know we are touching the boundaries of our personal conscience, and we want to go beyond, right? And then when you have this conscience, you know, harmful actions are often based on a good conscience, right? So in a war situation, for example, um, hang on, I have to look after my dog. He's just going nuts. 1 minute. I'll be right back. So we stop there. Harmful actions are often done with a good conscience, and we all know that in a war situation, you kill somebody else, you have a good conscience because that's what you've been told to do. You have to, you know, protect your country or your parents or whatnot. So that's it. And you think that's crazy because in another situation you would have a bad conscience to kill somebody. No, but this is just a conditioning. We are conditioned that the same action can be good or bad. You know, depending on the context where you come from. And a lot of religion, they are teaching you what is good and bad, right? And another religion has a completely different viewpoint. So the same action is, depending on which religion you are in, is either good or bad. So the act as such is neither good or not bad. It's the conscience that makes it good or bad, right? AKA the conditioning. Conscience only works in systems, and we are talking about systems. We are talking about a family system, and this is why the conscience is important when we work with family constellation, because we are working with a family system, and the family system has several conscience, and they will have an impact on the work and how we perceive relationships in the family system and find entanglements. Outside of the system reveals the action, this is true face. So something that is actually marked as good in the family system, if one steps out, looks at it, sees, oh, that's actually a bad thing to kill somebody, right? But when you are in the system, you cannot perceive it as such. You have to step out. This is also why when we are doing the work as a family constellation facilitator, although we are becoming part of the system, we are still always looking at the whole system from outside, not from within. Because we don't want to be bound by the conscience of the system. So this conditioning or this personal conscience is tribal, has an animal nature, and is not a good guide. It is meant to survive only. It's not meant to make good choices. It is just give basic survival skills, right? And that's it. So some people are very comfortable in living in this all their lives. That's fine. But whoever wants to gain more freedom and happiness for themselves and step out of a confinement and expand their consciousness cannot stay in the family as such with their conscience. That's impossible. Because you're always fighting then in the end. Connected with the emotion of guilt and atonement, many bad things have been done with a feeling of innocence. Innocence is a feeling that comes out from family constellations, and it doesn't mean somebody is innocent, right? At all. If you step outside the system, you think, oh my gosh, very, very guilty. But it is not felt as such. It's all a matter of the conscience. So an emotion that is conveyed in a family constellation is as such only revealing something if you know in which context the emotion comes. Guilt and innocence are not equal to good and bad in one's action. So now you know that. So just because somebody feels innocent doesn't mean that he has not done bad things. What else can I say about personal conscience? The personal conscience is felt more than objectively detectable. Yeah, so that's something. We perceive our own actions as either good or bad, depending on our personal conscience. That's the same, right? And we often cannot overcome it to the last bit. Like there's always something stuck. And you always find something, oh my gosh, that is actually still a conditioned belief that I'm carrying with me. And I'm already, so old and have done so many had so many wise teachers and have done so many development in my personal life, and still, there's still something. That's fine. That's what happens. But as soon as these remains are detected, you can work with them. You can let them go. They only work sufficiently subconsciously. That's where they work sufficient. They don't work sufficient when they are consciously worked at. So that's again part of the survival instinct of the baby. This is why we are in alpha state and learning without judgment what is right or wrong in the family we are born into, because this is what gives us the feeling of belonging. So the family decides what is good and bad, not somebody else, not a god or not a little, what can I say, a government. The family does this, right? We are conditioned within the first 7 years of our lives in this state, which is like, call it theta stage, could be hypnosis, as far as hypnosis between 2 and 6 years, or alpha state, which is then later from 5 to 8 years. I call it alpha state because this is encompassing the whole journey of a child. But if you think of hypnosis, that's a child is like when it's really young, it's right in the state of hypnosis. It has no self, no sense of self, and it's just observing, and you can suggest everything to a child. You can say to the child, you are an elephant, and they would think they're an elephant. Yeah, that's astounding when you're adult, but that is how the system works. So the personal conscience defines the boundaries of our beliefs and creates judgment of the behaviors of others. Now we have this problem that we think that our family system knows it all, and another system doesn't know it any better. So if you are then you're coming to the boundaries of your family system, and there's another family system you are clashing with other values, other conscience, that is when war starts. Because it's not reasoned, this behavior, this feeling of good and bad. Therefore, to go beyond these boundaries, one has to experience a bad conscience and a rebellion against the family. Now, hands up, who feels like a rebellion in their own family? 2 hands up. This is a really good sign. I would be astounded if you wouldn't feel like a rebellion in your family and do the work, because this is kind of a prerequisite, right, to step over the boundaries of your personal and your collective conscience of your family and do your own thing with good intention and good, first you feel bad and then you start to feel better and better about it. And then, so in the family system, that is very interesting. You have this feeling of innocence because you do what the family system is doing, blah, 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 all good. And then you go through the boundaries, you want to step out, you see the life on the other side of the fence, you have a peek, you actually go over the fence. Now you step out, right? And all of a sudden, although you do nothing else, this feeling of innocence becomes a feeling of guilt. That's just because the family system, you do nothing else. All the same, it's just because the family system has created this conscience. So in relationship, that's interesting. That was a bit theoretically, but this is now really practical. In relationship between family members, any kind of relationship, mother, father, grandfather, siblings towards it doesn't matter. They always fulfill 3 basic needs. So the first need is a need for bond, and that is fulfilled through attachment. Not love, attachment, which we can also call conditioned love. But not when we refer to love, when we refer to the orders of love, we're talking about unconditional love. This is why I don't use the word love for conditional love, I use attachment. So there is the need for bond in the relationship, and this is fulfilled through attachment. Secondly, we have the need for order with our family member, and that is fulfilled through obedience. No? You obey the order. And then thirdly, the need for balance is also felt in the relationship of members of the family, and this is fulfilled through compensation. And if you have these three basic needs, you can also go to a partnership or whatever relationship you're looking at, you will always find that they are fulfilled with either attachment, obedience, or compensation, or the opposite, right? You can also use the opposite and still, feel the need. You're just rebelling. So being a teenager, for example, right? You feel the need to bond still, but you don't want to make it through attachment, you want to make it through detachment. Which doesn't work, but let's try to try. So the three basic needs are often in conflict with each other. So the following different aspects of the personal, they follow different aspects of the personal conscience. For example, if you're in the need for bond with a family member, you'll feel guilt if you are excluded, because attachment is the goal, right? So if you're excluded, you feel guilt. Well, you're not guilty for anything. You haven't done anything, right? But that's how it feels. And this is what makes then family constellation come into play. To get the order right. Despite the feelings were confused. So you would feel guilt if you're excluded and innocence if you're included in the family, regardless what you have done. Even if the family does something bad. If you're in need of compensation, you'll feel receiving as guilt and giving as innocent. How often have we felt that or know somebody who cannot receive, right? Why? They feel guilty. They feel guilty to receive. They need to give and give and give, and everything is completely out of whack. There's always this need to compensate, and they don't know how to do it. If you're in the need of order, you'll feel fear of punishment as guilt and loyalty as innocence, obviously. Right. So I let you think that in. Watch the recordings again. This is a little bit deeper stuff of Bert Hellinger's teaching, and this needs time, to find the practical aspects of it. So then we have the collective conscience, which is above personal conscience, and the collective conscience exists in addition to the personal conscience, and its function is to enforce the orders of love in a family system. So we are working with the collective conscience when we are facilitating a family constellation for the family system. It aims to integrate the excluded and forgotten or dead family members by choosing another family member, which is alive, to represent this person, therefore creating in what we call an entanglement between these family members. And that is the core work of family constellation. To understand the entanglements and to find what mends. These entanglements, now we're coming back to the personal conscience, is not felt as good or bad at all. Rather as imitation of the represented family member, having the same disease, accident, job, same destiny. Often they look similar. Sometimes they have the same name even, and so forth. This is when the family soul or the family system creates an entanglement to make sure the excluded person is not forgotten. And that is very important and very deliberate and very good hint for a family constellation. So I often, when I do a family constellation, ask the client when they share their issue, how's about, does your mother has the same? Or your father? Or your grandmother? And then most often the client is astounded and said, oh yes, actually, now thinking about it, same. The representative is feeling a sensation. So now we have a family constellation, as you know, for the family members are represented by other members of the workshop. The representative, they are often feeling the same um, sensation as the entangled person, as a being twisted and torn at all times, or they cannot focus on their own life, or they have a feeling of being controlled remotely, even, right? Or not fulfilled or happy, or they are driven against their own will, living two lives. All these, when something like this comes up, you know they are representing an entangled person. There is somebody else you have to look for. This is not the end of the constellation. This is just the beginning. And this is where most of the therapies ends. And this is where we start with, right? If the excluded family member is seen in a family constellation, this entanglement can be lifted and the client feels an enormous relief and freedom to live his or her own life, because the flow of love can now flow undisturbed again. So the eye is always on the client and to find, or the representative of the client in the family constellation, and to see when is this relief taking place. That's the peak of a constellation. We call it the peak of the constellation. That is also the end of the constellation. The entanglement is often repetitive and also seen in previous generations. So always ask, how's about your mother? How's about your father, grandfather, grandmother? Have you heard of this in another generation? It is the destiny of a family member to be entangled, and that is often chosen before birth. So if you are working with somebody who has a birth defect, right, that is a sign of an entanglement. Either, and now this goes a little bit somewhere else, but either with a family member or with a past life. That is also always possible, which is actually the same, but we come to that in module 4. It's not a difference, really. The deep unconscious love of one family member to the excluded one makes way for the healing movement of the soul, is what Bert Hellinger says. And that is so. So there is this love for the excluded person of the client, let's say it's a client, that he doesn't even know of, this excluded, because it's excluded, he doesn't know it. But there is a deep feeling of love and this longing, and this is why they feel something's not right in their life. Something is missing, something's not working, something is, because there is this love for this person which they are entangled in, which they have no idea about. And in the family constellation, to make this visible is already the relief. And then that's the first step. And then the second step is to find what mends. Because the entangler, the person the entangled client is entangled with, the entangler, has an issue, right? We call that a dynamic. Now the second step in the family constellation is to find this issue, the dynamic, and clear it. Find what mends. The collective conscience has boundaries, as the personal one. It includes only family members of the first order of love and excludes all others. So every family member we had before in our animation is part of the family system, and everybody else is excluded. That's the boundary. This is why we cannot work with anybody outside of the family system in a family constellation. So the collective conscience rules over the personal conscience. If there's a clash, the personal conscience tells, for example, the family member to do something because it feels right. For example, making a child wants to atone for the sins of the parent, because that's what children do in this family, right? They have to atone for the sins of the parents. But the collective consciousness does not tolerate this because it's a breach of the orders of love. Nobody can atone for somebody else, especially not children for their parents, because we're coming to this tomorrow, which is the second order of love. Who comes first? So this is a breach of the orders of love. So the collective conscience is not tolerating that. It overrules the personal conscience. And it creates an entanglement to make sure it's not forgotten and somebody suffers enough to look for help, and hopefully help will be given in form of an experienced facilitator of family constellation, and then the entanglement can be seen and lifted. So now we have the third conscience, the conscience of the spirit or the spirit mind, which also rules above the personal and the collective conscience. It unites both, because as we can see, there can be a clash between the personal and the collective consciousness, but in the conscience of the spirit, as Bert Hellinger names it, these are all united. So these boundaries are dissolved. Because this conscience has no boundaries, no judgment, no good or bad, and it doesn't exclude anybody or anything. And that is the conscience the facilitator or the helper is obliged to be in. He is not in the personal conscience, not entangled with the personal conscience of the client, not even with the collective consciousness of the family system. The helper or the facilitator stays with the conscience of the spirit mind. Otherwise, it would be restricted by the boundaries of the conscience and cannot help, right? And this is very important, and it's actually really, because sometimes it's really challenging not to give in what the client wants and stay outside of this conscience and find those who need to be part of it without any judgment. There's nobody good or bad. The most horrific perpetrator is still a family member who is excluded and needs to be seen and loved. Otherwise, help is not available for the family. And nobody else can see that other than you. Until, make it visible in a family constellation, then when the other family members can see, then the way is shown towards the healing movement. So the conscience of the spirit's role is to unite whatever needs unity. Let the love flow where it was interrupted. It is creative, and it's love itself. And this is why it is a beautiful thing to immerse into facilitating family constellation when you are letting go of your own personal conscience and your own collective consciousness, as well as the personal and collective consciousness of your client, and you can really immerse yourself in the spirit conscience, and from there work, because then you feel you are carried. You don't have to do things, you don't have to perform, you don't have to be good, you don't have to remember, and that's the right feeling, which is not even a feeling. So if I've been asked, it must feel so good if you do this amazing constellation and somebody's so happy after it. And I said, not really. I don't feel good or bad. It's just, you know, you don't feel like you're doing it. So this, therefore, you're not claiming any result of it. You are part of the spirit conscience, and that is fulfilling. But it doesn't make you really feel good nor bad. That's the other thing. If something doesn't work, you don't feel bad about it, right? That's on the other side. No need to be bad about it. So this is a feeling of belonging, contentment, guidance, and harmony, actually, more than feeling good about yourself or what has been achieved. Especially no feelings of guilt or innocence are present in this state, which is super important for this work. To explain it with other words is like a feeling of peace and tranquility and guidance. It is also a place where you feel that there are actually no problems to be solved, because actually looking at the family system, you can see the love for each other anyhow, right? It is just that the entangled person can't see it, but you would be able to see that. The conscious, so therefore, for you as a facilitator, there is no problem. The conscience of the spirit is accepting everything as it is as well. It's also accepting the suffering and the entanglements and every of these emotions that come with that. This acceptance is there. It doesn't wish to change things, right? However, things changing from this perspective, because you allow it to change as well, right? Because you're not against change, and that's the natural flow of love in the family system that you allow to happen. This is why you're not doing things in this way. You let things happen so they get back to order, right? Without disagreeing with the disorder. There's nothing wrong with it. This is like when I've been asked, okay, so now I learned the orders of love. Now I have to behave like this and do this and do this and do this, and then everything will be good. Then no, that's not how it works at all, right? That would be horrible if you would teach everybody the orders of love and every life has to be lived like it. That would be so boring. Where's the individuality? Everything can happen and should happen. Every individual life circumstances is good as it is, right? But that doesn't mean it doesn't need to be changed, because that is also good, right? So you always start from this point, or your standpoint is you see perfection, first of all. And then you said, okay, and let's see how life wants to unfold now with your help. So how do we access this conscience? You allow the personal and collective conscience to dissolve into it. That is the way and the destiny of the new family constellation. It's a quote of Hellinger. Okay, let's talk about destiny, common destiny, and free choice. So the destiny is felt as pre-existing. That's kind of the description of a destiny. It feels like it's destined to be. It's like another expression for it was already there, now I see it, kind of situation. It also feels as if it's out of one's control, right? Oh, this is my destiny. What can I do? There's a strong urge to achieve something. Oh, that's my destiny to do this. I need to help children in Africa. I need to go there. That's, I feel a strong urge. Nobody knows why. So you said, that's my destiny. I have to go to Africa and help the children. It can also be what's good or bad, both. I mean, it's just a matter of personal conscience, if it felt that's good or bad. And it's always supported by a good personal conscience or a good collective conscience. You will always feel good about it, because it's a destiny. You want to follow it. It's might daunting. You know, you might fear something, but the way, the step you're taking, they feel good by nature. Then you know, okay, it's my destiny to do this and to go there and to have this or this other relationship. Then there's a common destiny that the whole family is sharing. The whole family system can have a destiny. And again, destinies, personal and family destinies, solve also in the conscience of the spirit. Again, accepting what is with no wanting to change it because it's destiny. It's okay as it is. So now the big question is that we normally have to discuss here, what about free choice? If there are so many relationships and ways destined already, where do I have free choice? So I would like you to share your thoughts on free choice. Ooh, anybody wants to talk about it? What is free choice for you? Where do you feel you have free choice, or do you feel you have no free choice? Or have you never thought of it in your whole life before? Mana.
Maya, I think we are free to choose, but we're not free to choose the consequences of our choices.
Okay, so that's a good standpoint. So you think, although there's destiny, you still can choose what you want to do. So you can overrule destiny by choice.
Yes. But
Okay.
then you'll have to face up to the consequences which lead up with the choice that you've made.
Yes. Yes. Very good. Thank you. Rocio?
I think you have the choice on how to fulfill your destiny, but I'm not sure if you have a lot of choice of what your destiny is.
That's a very good aspect.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I don't know. I think that we are all born with a destiny, like how you fulfill it. That's where you have free will. Like
So
you
you
have
have
like
free
a
will to
blueprint
follow your
set up.
destiny or not to follow your destiny. That's what you say? Or you
I
have
think you
no
will
free
follow it
will?
anyway.
Yeah.
I think you will follow it anyway. It's how you follow it. You know what I mean? It's
Ah,
kind of
yes.
like
I see what you
um,
say.
I feel like I was born with a blueprint that I have to fulfill, and it's my choice on how I want to do it. And life always gives you options that you can choose from. But that's how I see it.
Or you've been, as you said it, born with a blueprint, and the free choice is when you are fulfilling it.
Yeah, true. Yeah, which is, yeah.
Yeah.
I think, for
But you can
example, in the case of
postpone.
an entanglement,
Yeah.
yeah, you can postpone it. I think that you postpone it until you have the choice. That if you have an entanglement with like a previous family member, you can choose to actually face it and heal it, or you can actually choose to suffer like being sick because you're not like. So both things are fulfilling your destiny, and both things are right. It's just how you choose. Like I don't know.
Wonderful.
That
Thank
has been
you.
my experience. I don't know.
Lovely. Thank you for sharing, Rocio. Good food for thoughts. Claudia.
I think sometimes, or a lot of times people don't know what their destiny is. They feel there's something, but they have absolutely no idea what it is and how to follow it. But I think life is very interesting. So you can actually, where you feel very strongly in a way you want to go, where certain things jump out of you. And this is how eventually you maybe find the read that actually leads to unravel what your destiny may be. And then there's so many ways, just like so many ways roads lead to Rome. And I also think there's so many ways of how you actually can fulfill one's destiny, And yeah, that's my opinion about it, or what I
Lovely.
think.
Very good. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts, Claudia, on that. So I'm not here to answer this question. I'm happy for you to discuss it and think about it. Um, I have heard one of my wonderful spiritual teachers have said, you think you have free will until you know that you don't, right? And I think that is really encompassing what all of you have experienced. It is something very subjective, how you feel about it. But then at the end, we are all taken into service by our family system. And we will, at one point or the other, have to face it. Yeah. Very good. Okay, so let's talk about guilt. It's a very important topic. Um, Malcolm Southwood, for example, with whom I have studied several methods of spiritual and energy healing, and some I also have influenced my work with family constellation. He always said, and that was exactly what Bert Hellinger also said, they were actually quite similar in a way, look for the guilt, follow the guilt. This emotion of guilt is what you need to find to heal. Because if there is not all shame, like I say guilt now, let's for the sake of the discussion. Because that is what is causing, or the underlying the action, or that is causing this emotion is actually causing a trauma to be have an imprint in your subconscious. If there would not be guilt involved, people can say or do whatever they want. You get over it. But when you feel guilt, you don't get over it. This is like an anchor or like a rock that is tied to your ankles, and that is dragging you down, and you can't do anything about it, right? All the way to the bottom of the ocean. That is not the action, it's the guilt. And the guilt is a feeling, and we talk about that in module 4 in great depth, with very low vibration. In fact, the guilt vibrates so low that you cannot live with it. It's impossible. It's low livable. Guilt and shame are emotions that are vibrating so low under the vibration where you can actually live. This is why guilt and shame are always camouflaged, hidden, disguised, or overlaid with another emotion. This is why this feeling of guilt and shame will not jump into your face when you facilitate. You have to look for it. So never be content with the family constellation until you not find the emotion of guilt. This is our goal. And that's in the family constellation, and that's also when you work on traumas with other methods. For example, if a child, let's take a child, if a child is encountering an abusive situation, right? That's not necessarily causing a subconscious trauma that is then embedded in the family soul. There needs to be two aspects to it. One is it must be this, whatever behavior must be perceived as the life-threatening, right, to the child. Perceived. It's not even necessarily meant as this. It's a perception. And the child feels guilty for the action. And it does this very likely because it's in theta or alpha state, absorbing everything and not able to distinguish between its own actions and the actions of the perpetrator. And this is why this feeling of guilt is kind of jumping over on the child. And now this action is perceived as life-threatening and comes with the feeling of guilt, is now becoming a trauma, an emotional trauma that the subconscious is putting in the farthest corner of wherever the subconscious is, of the realm of the subconscious, and doesn't want to be touched anymore, to the point where it's completely forgotten. So I make an example. I was just recently working with a client on that, and it turned out in a regression, it was, that as a 1-year-old baby, she has encountered her brother, who is 5, meddle when she was on the changing table, being very interested in her genitals, which as a 5-year boy is quite normal, like seeing the sister having something that he hasn't has. So he wants to inquire, right? So there was no live threat to the baby, nor was it a malintention of the brother, right? Nothing like this. But the subconscious has put this as a traumatic experience because the baby didn't know what's happening. It felt the mother wasn't there, the father wasn't there to protect them. It felt a life threat of this, inappropriate whatever doing of the brother, first of all. And secondly, the guilt that the brother was already able to create, like in his system, because he shouldn't do that with his little girl, with his little sister, was jumping over to her. So she felt guilt for this action of the brother. And this together formed a trauma that is so deep buried in the subconscious that it needed a regression to, bring it up again and to look at it and see what it was. A very innocent thing in the end, right? Nothing life-threatening at all. Nothing she needs to be guilty for. So then they're seen and cleared, and we go through that in module 4, either in a family constellation or with a spiritual healing, doesn't matter, same effect, brings this trauma, dissolves this trauma, right? But it's always the guilt you need to find. It makes no sense. It's not like what you think people need to be guilty for. That's not what I mean. You find the feeling of guilt, which is perceived under another feeling, which is always camouflaging. Could be desire. In her case, it was desire. She was overeating. So the feeling of desire was camouflaging the feeling of guilt. Most of the time is anger. Anger is a very good substitute for guilt. So the feeling of anger is camouflaging the feeling of guilt. So it takes a deep digging to find the guilt. It is not objective. Forget about what you think about guilt. No? Like in this example, why would this baby girl has guilt for what? It's 1 year old. That is not the point, right? And it is really felt. So you feel there's a feeling of this emotion. The feeling, it is not thought about. It is not obvious. None of this, right? It depends on the conscience. So what you do and not do in a family is important also to create this feeling of guilt. There is no guilt. So that is the conclusion, actually. And I'm sure you will agree with me, at least when the course is over, when the training is over. In the end, nobody is guilty for anything. No. Things happen. And then, as Mana said, you have to deal with the consequences. That's all. No room for guilt. No room for shame. There's no room in the universe for these emotions. These are fake emotions. This is why the energy is lower than a livable energy, because they are not even real emotions. They are coming from the conscience, right? And they are the cause of traumas, which is interesting on a philosophical level, why the human experience would create something that is a fake emotion with a vibration that is lower than where you can live with. For what? Right? For what do we do this? So, something to ponder on. Divine intervention is revealing all these, right? So this revelation that there is no guilt and this other emotion is overlaying the guilt, and to decipher all this and bring it all to the light, this is with the help of what I call divine intervention, right? Because we are all having our own personal and collective conscience, and if we would look from this part of our lives, we cannot see it neither, right? We have to be in this state of spiritual conscience, which we are only coming in through divine intervention. So it's not something you can achieve with hard trying or being, you know, with any kind of egoistical tendencies. You can't go there. You have to let go of these. You have to let go of egoistic tendencies to go there. This is why the work itself is a result of personal growth towards more self-realization, right? Self-realization meaning who you really are beyond the perceived ego, right? And from this state where everything is divinity, from there you can help. And that is a very reachable goal. That is not difficult, neither. It's just work to do, work in personal growth. And shedding all the layers away, which you are not. That's the onion. The onion in family constellation. Every family constellation is one layer of the onion, and you shed one onion, and then the next, and then the next, and then the next. And when every onion layer is shed, what is there? Nothing. That's the goal. To come to this state of being nothing or nobody. Right? And that's the beautiful state of being in the collective or spirit and in the spiritual spirit conscience of the spirit, and open for divine intervention. Guilt is an emotion programmed before 7 years old due to the collective conscience, right? It's a program. It's not real. It's not a real emotion. And the emotion is the source of suffering then, because it's overlaid with another emotion which is expressible. And this is the emotion the client comes to you with. Anger or desire or something like that. Okay, let's talk about death and karma. So first of all, talk about fear. Have you ever thought about what is the source of every fear? This is something that came across your journey so far. Not really? Okay, fear. Yeah, Claudia?
I think I think, in my opinion, most people have a big fear of death, because it's death as in physical death and not actually thinking of that the soul will live on forever. A lot of people, I think, might have the concept they want to live physically forever, and so therefore they're afraid of physically dying. I think that might be the most expressible fear, or what people actually carry on with them.
Yes, Claudia, I totally agree. If you really look at any kind of fear, in the end, it's the fear of dying.
Yeah.
So if you think of, so phobia by definition is to fear to die of something which you cannot possibly die of. So a phobia of You can have phobia with everything. Let's say the most commonly of spiders, for example. How many spiders are in your life that can actually kill you? Not very many, right? But this phobia is making a person being afraid of the tiniest little innocent helper of your household with 8 legs. Well, it's not a death threat of this innocent creature, but the phobia is telling you you could die. What? I don't know of even what, a bite of it or a sting, or I don't know what the mind comes up with. But that's actually the fear, is the fear of dying. You can have a phobia apparently with everything. You can have a phobia of pillowcases, for example. That is the fear of being suffocated by a pillow. So the fear, every fear that we are experiencing is our body, our mind, or the subconscious mind telling us, you could die of it. Stay away, right? The fear of heights is the fear of falling to death. And some people have a fear of height if they step on a stool, which is barely a meter above ground. How can you die if you fall down there? But the fear is real. It's very, very real. So the fear in a phobia, it's kind of completely like obvious that, in most phobias, it's quite obvious you can't die of it. But there's all of these little fears that we are encountering in our own lives and the lives of others. Then if you think the threat through, what is it really that you are afraid of? It's the fear of dying. It's the fear of starving. It's the fear of suffocating. It's the fear of drowning. It's the fear of being run over by a car. It's the fear of crashing with a plane. It's always the fear of dying. There's in fact no other fear. It just not always is so obvious that it's a fear of dying. But if you think it through, it's always a fear of dying. If a child is afraid of a dragon or a monster under the bed, what's the problem having a monster under the bed? The child thinks the monster's going to eat it, right? It's always a fear of dying. So we forget with all the other aspects of fear. It's a fear of dying. So why are we afraid of something that is inevitably happening? Right? Strange. And it's even causing a trauma that is carried over from generation to generation and kept in the family soul as so important that it needs to be solved. Otherwise, the family soul cannot move on. Something that is inevitably happening to everyone. That's really, really strange, right? If you think about it. And then correctly, what is even dying, right? If we know we are living on. By the way, there's the blog, the blog on the website, on the Family Constellation Virtual website. There's a mini series at the moment about exactly that topic, a matter of life and death. So this is a really, really interesting question, and I urge you to ponder on it on your path to personal growth. You have to go through all aspects of fear, which is the fear of dying, and really understand it for yourself. What is it you're afraid of? Who's afraid of what? What am I losing? Why am I afraid of something that is inevitable coming? All these questions are really, really important to look at, and not to shy away from the thoughts of death and what happens in death. And it's actually super interesting if you're following some near-death experiences that people are talking about in public, online, or in books or something. It's really interesting to follow that, and gives you more an impression of what death really is. Anybody knows about the Course in Miracles? Yes? Great, awesome. It's one of my favorites. So have you done it or just heard about it? You have to do it. You done it, Alessandra? The whole course, 1 year? Darshan? Have you followed the whole course? Wow, that's a 1-year course, everyday exercises. It's really, really intense. Mm, yeah, so this is like a book like this big, that large, this thick. Uh, tiny, 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 tiny letters, one at the other. Looks like the telephone book um, of New York or Tokyo. Um, and it is all about just one question and one conclusion. There is no such thing as dying. Interesting. So this is so if that seems to be something in your aura that needs to be looked at, the Course of Miracles will be the way to go for. Once overcome the fear of death is freedom, right? Now life begins beyond that, because before that we are slaves to this fear of dying. Also the fear of dogs, the fear of this, the fear of not moving in another country or anything. There's no freedom there. We are really, really bound. It's all the fear of dying. And something that is actually not even real, existing, from one perspective, the perspective of the soul, and from the perspective of the body-mind consciousness, inevitably anyhow, right? It's interesting that is ruling our lives and the lives of everybody else. So that's a journey to take to understand fear, the fear of dying, and where you have it, and go and make it your journey to overcome it. So as a matter of example, from my personal experience, I was afraid of dogs, very much so. And I know I have it from my mother, but that hasn't helped. So because I love animals. So when I was in my adult years, when I was seeing a dog that's of a certain size mainly, I was really afraid. I was shaking. And I stepped to the other side of the road. And I never had an incident with a dog, by the way. I stepped to the other side of the road and hope that this dog doesn't run loose. Or if it was, God forbid, without a human, oh my gosh, panic. So that was the beginning of my spiritual healing. And my first teacher, one of my first teachers, said to me, okay, so, or not to me, to the group, said, think of a fear you have, whatever fear it is, as a friend. So, for example, fear of dogs. When you are seeing a dog and you know you're going to pass a dog, you take the fear of dogs and give it a personal appearance. And you take it by the hands and you take it to your side and say, okay, it's your job to protect me, right? Not mine, it's yours. And then you walk with your friend, the fear, your way, where you want to go, and disregard what's in your way, because you have your friend with you who's looking after it. And it sounds as quite simple, but it works a treat. Well, for me, it worked very well. So then overcoming. So what is the fear of dogs? Is of course the fear of dying, to be bitten to death by the teeth of a dog. Although how likely is that, right? I mean, excuse me. Very unlikely. But the mind doesn't work like this. So in my case, it was my mother was afraid of animals and all kinds, especially dogs, and I just have conditionally picked that up in the early years, and that is all. And we all have these things. So our journey to personal growth is to overcome it. So take every fear you can think of that you have, fear of losing a loved one, fear of whatever it is, and make it a friend. Make it your friend that you can rely on to solve it when it ever becomes a problem. Then you will know it will never become a problem, because the fear is very unreal, in fact. Right? It's an illusion, as death is. And this is beautiful to go through it And then coming back to the original question, so why is a family soul so concerned with a trauma that is based on a perceived or real threat of life, and the emotion guilt with is created, which is not even real? To make an imprint in the family soul over 7 generations and let every generation suffer just because of that, right? Sounds crazy to me. I don't have the answer, but that is what is happening. So there is more behind which we still can discover. So death and karma, you all know the concept of karma, do you? Karma being a Sanskrit word meaning action or cause and effect, meaning basically everything has an effect. Everything that is caused, every action that is caused has an effect. Karma is more specific, meaning that the action is in one lifetime and then the effect is in another lifetime, right? So that is when you look at multiple lifetimes. Where does death plays a role there? Where does death plays a role? Nothing really, other than you get the chance through dying to come to your next lifetime, to face the consequences of your action and to balance them out, right? So in this case, it's a good thing, something very desirable. However, having talked about suicide, that's not helping, right? Because as you will learn in module 4, when you commit suicide, you are dwelling in the in-between world. You are not able to leave. So you can't work on your karma. You can't do anything. You have to be reborn in the same situation, basically. Right? So it doesn't help. So suicide is not helping with karma at all. It might even create a bad karma. I don't know that, but definitely doesn't help to get to get into the balance of things. What else is there? Anybody wants to share something about karma that comes to your mind? Your concept of it, or when you came across it, or Claudia?
I just have a question. I developed a fear of heights quite late in my life, and I died and I came back, so I know what is on the other side, and I personally am not afraid of dying, right? But that fear of height is still very much in my life. So the question is, can that come from a former lifetime, or might there be something that is not associated with me personally, but comes from somewhere else?
Yaha, here we go. That would be a fabulous constellation, Claudia, to look at your fear of dying or fear of height. Yes.
Yeah.
So even if you have overcome fear of dying because of a near-death experience, which is also interesting if you want to share that with us, but you can still have an entanglement with somebody who's afraid of dying.
Okay, yeah, because I wonder, it's like, I don't know why that is still there, because I'm not afraid of dying at all. I know where I'm going. So, and it's just like one of those things I think, so why is that still persistent and shown? And it's like,
yeah, and we will look
wonder when it comes. Yeah,
we will look in a family constellation at that. Please remind me of it. It will be very interesting, and we will see where it comes from. It either a former life or an entanglement with your family system. We will see what it is, and that's a very good sign for that, because if you feel there's possibly no explanation in your own life why something is as it is, this is a hint that there's a family dynamic in your family system that is playing up in your life.
Yeah, the question is, like the thing is, that fear came I tried to take my own life when I was 17, and I jumped out of a window. I jumped 10 meters down. I survived. But that fear came after, I did that. But as I said, through my life, I'm now actually 54. So I've actually worked through all of those kind of issues, and I'm not afraid of dying anymore. And I actually nearly died then. So somehow I'm not quite sure whether it's still part of that what I did, or whether it is coming from
Claudia.
somewhere else.
So that's a good example when we talk about family dynamics, how they look like. Now, yes, for everybody, when Claudia said she was jumping out of the window when she was 17 to kill herself, to take her life, this is quite unusual, isn't it? Most people would take a pill. This is quite drastic to do something like that. The question is, and there are other possibilities, drowning and, but jumping out of a window, I find that it's right
It wasn't
out there.
planned, by the way, so it was just an opportunity. I was walking past a open window,
And then you
next
said,
thing
I
I remember, I was on the ground and could not get up. Yeah, so.
Oh, this is getting even more interesting. We can also have a possession here. So, that's a very interesting case. So, but just assuming now, because we're not looking at it now, but we will.
No.
But there's assuming there is a reason why Claudia chooses, even if she doesn't remember how she chose, but how she chose to jump out of the window instead of doing anything else to take her life. No? And then having a fear of height. So this is all interwoven, right? And it's showing that there is a dynamic. And now there is a dynamic now from what Claudia says. Actually, I'm actually now drawn to more the possession. But it could be a family entanglement. It could be a possession, or it could be a past life that is playing out.
Yeah.
So we have already here 3. But you will learn on this course to deal with all of these 3 options.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you. All right. So, so I want, before we go to prepare for part 2, Claudia, would you like to share with us, did you had a near-death experience? Did you went through that what we perceive as dying?
Yes, after what I did, my body went in shock, and when I was in hospital, and I tipped over, and what I perceived was a very bright room. It was like it had no confinement. It was very bright, just like like if you look at the screen right in front of you where all that white is, this is how the room I perceived. And first there was nothing there except for a very bright light and a feeling of being safe, being loved. And then suddenly there was appearing a table and 2 chairs, and I was being sat down by an invisible entity and being given the choice to either stay there or to go back.
How did that feel?
Well, I was actually, for a little while, I was torn. I was like, I was not sure whether the feeling was great there. I thought, oh yeah, I would love to stay there. But somehow I had also a feeling I still have something to do in this life. And so I chose to actually stay. And at the same time, I could actually see from like being in the corner of the room that I've been resuscitated. So there was a very interesting.
You've been what?
Resuscitated, so that people actually tried to bring me back to life. So
you could see that like the clinic room and the operation room.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Who were you talking to?
Well, I think because it had no physical form, so I would say it was actually source. Yeah. I can see spirit and stuff. I can see people who have died, and I can feel them and stuff like that. So it was nothing which has lived before as in a human existence. Could have been an angel, but I also remember that when I jumped, the only thing I remember was I had a feeling that somebody, because I jumped head first, that two hands turned me over. And so I landed up on my feet. Otherwise, I would have died. So, yes, it was quite profound experience that has shaped my life quite extensively. And in a way, it also has set me free. In a lot of other ways, it has set me free.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Okay. Right. So we leave it here, but if you want to volunteer, Claudia, to constellate in one of our opportunities when we constellate family, when you do family constellations, just let us know.
Yes,
And
definitely. Yeah, definitely.
happy
Yes.
to look
Yeah.
at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, good. So before we talk about tomorrow, is there any other question? All good? A lot of information. You must be tired, which is fine. Forget about it for a while. Tomorrow is a fresh day. We talk about something else. Um, and it will all make sense at the end of the training, if not now. So, part 2, tomorrow. I would like you to prepare for part 2. It's not much, it's just a little bit. I want you to have a photo of your mother and your father handy. Yeah? And it would be great if you have a printed version, because if you show us your iPhone or your phone, we don't see it. The camera doesn't pick up. You know, you can also share on Zoom if you have it on your desktop. That's another option. You can share it on Zoom. But if you only have, if we have a couple of people on the phone showing the photo, we can't see that. So that's not an option. So either printed version or a digital version on your desktop. Yeah, because we are going tomorrow into the second order of love, which is who comes first. And we will take the chance while we do that to introduce ourselves to each other's mother and father, and bring them into our training. Yes, Claudia.
I am very sorry, but I have absolutely no photograph of my mother. My mother actually burned every photos the family owned. So I have absolutely no photo of her at all.
Okay, but you have your father.
Yes, I do have my father. Yeah.
Do you remember your mother?
Yeah, in my head, yes.
Why
I
don't you
can
make a little
create a picture in my
drawing?
head.
Yeah, make a little sketch, a drawing.
If my drawing is just as good if I draw an elephant, it looks like a dog. So
If you want to.
yeah, I
Want.
can't draw really. No, sorry, but yeah, I can create a picture in my head a little bit, but yeah, that's it.
Okay, all right. Thanks for sharing. Okay, so anything else that you would like to know, either regarding today's module or tomorrow's module or the training in general, before we say goodbye for tonight? All good. Fantastic. Very good. So I wish you a restful rest of the day or night, and I see you tomorrow at New Zealand time 6 p.m. And you know your own time zone.
Thank you, Maya.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
See ya.
Thank you, Maya. Good night. Bye. See you all tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye
Bye.
bye.